Welcome to the Faith Forum, a series of talks with leading thinkers, best-selling authors, business leaders, philosophers, artists, and theologians of our time. We're so happy you've joined us, and we hope this podcast offers food for your spiritual journey. From Christ Episcopal Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm the Reverend Chip Edens, and this is the Faith Forum.
Well, friends, it is my delight to welcome you this morning. My name is Joshua Case, and it is my honor to have Professor Miroslav Volf with us this morning to have a conversation around life worth living. Miroslav is the founding director of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, and he has written any number of books. One of his books, entitled Exclusion and Embrace, a theological exploration of identity, otherness, and reconciliation, was named one of Christianity Today's 100 most important books to be read that were written during the 20th century. He's written books on flourishing, on the home of God, and he is a member of the Episcopal Church USA and the Evangelical Church in Croatia. And he's been involved for many years in international ecumenical dialogues, including with the Vatican's Council for Promoting Christian Unity, and interfaith dialogues, including Muslim and Christian initiatives. It is a real honor to have you back to Christ Church.
Yes, thanks. I'm delighted to be back. What a wonderful place you have here, and and nice weather compared to where we are.
Yeah. Well, it's a real honor to have you back here as we kick off our series for the fall on what it means to live a well-lived life. This conversation that we're going to have today is based off of a book that recently came out. This is what it looks like. You can find it online. Life Worth Living, A Guide to What Matters Most. But the genesis of this book actually comes out of a class that you have taught, and a class that seemingly got oversubscribed. Can you say a little bit about the course and a little bit about what led to the coming together of this book?
Yeah. So I think origin of the book is the class, and origin of the class is a kind of puzzlement. Puzzlement that what used to be topics that used to be at the very heart of university education, from founding of Harvard all the way to hippie and yuppie years combined, 70s or something like that, which is to say, is worthy of our humanity. What kind of life is a good life? Has been marginalized from the university education. And the reasons why that has happened, if you're interested, I can tell you these. But I've been kind of startled then to think that what we study generally is how do you get from point A to point B? Now, you would say this is a kind of crazy thing to pay so much money to have education at Yale to study how do you get from point A to point B. But there are gazillions of points A's and points B's in our lives, and our lives consist, to great extent, how do you actually get from one to the other in various domains of our lives. Fantastic and important thing for us to know how to do. But what we rarely ask, and what universities have stopped asking, is the question, which B is worth getting to? And there are obviously kind of small kind of Bs, intermediate Bs. Mm-hmm. But all these Bs add up to kind of a large B of what is the purpose of our lives? Mm-hmm. What constitutes a good life? What should I pursue and do with my life? That is the big B that has not been sufficiently explored in past maybe 50 years in universities. And so the goal was, let's put it back on the agenda in a small class that we have been teaching. And after first time teaching it in the seminar, students were so incredibly excited about it, and so we continued, and it has been taught now for about 11 years at Yale, and the book is a result of that course. Mm-hmm.
It strikes me that the question of which B is worth living is not a new question. It seems like people have been asking this question for quite some time. And the book dials into the way in which we can go back through the various religious traditions and see that. How long do you think people have been asking this question?
I think as long as we actually were. I think it's as old as is humanity itself. You know, sometimes people, when I talk about these issues, sometimes people ask me, but isn't this a luxury question? So isn't this an upper middle class question? Because you kind of have most of the important material B's secured, and then you start asking these big existential B. And then I point them back to where you're taking me, right? Back to the history of humanity, where people lived in circumstances that we would consider abject poverty. And it's in these kinds of circumstances, too, that people have asked the question, what should I do with my life? Who am I as a human being? What is worthy of me? Why should I just follow my nose and my taste and my eyes and do whatever comes in front of me? Don't I have to step back and ask great question of the purposes of my life? And people have asked that question. Great religious traditions have all asked that question. Indeed, that question is at the heart of their pursuit. And I sometimes think that actually what's the case is that upper middle class folks and modern folks and also upper middle class folks are duped by variety of really glittering bees that are in front of their eyes, so that they are constantly pulled in the direction away from stepping back and asking that great question. To whose good actually am I doing what I am doing?
It strikes me, and you and I spoke about this a little bit, that there is this kind of, there's this narrative that is pervasive in culture, that there's always one thing more. There's this sense that there's always something more just there for me. And it doesn't matter which vocation or which life you happen to be living in any particular moment. The sort of, I don't want to call it the myth of progress, but the sense that like there's always a little bit more that I could do or a little bit more that I could achieve. And I don't know about others, but for me, at times it can feel like the hamster wheel begins to move a little bit faster the more I begin to look at this question of a little bit more that's out there. Say a little bit about these, because I think this is what you're getting at with the glittering bees. Say a little bit about hamster wheel and the glittering bees and the call, the siren call of culture to always say that there's just a little bit more.
You know, how many lectures do you want me to give? But so you can put it almost this way, that partly why we do that is because we're humans, and we always there is a line here or a wall here, and you always want to. What's behind there? So the kind of transgressing the boundary of the givenness is what we as humans naturally do. Hence, trying to move also forward and somehow improve also is what we naturally do. But what is true also is that we live in a society that, here's a big word by a sociologist friend of mine, which is able to live by stabilizing itself dynamically. Now, that's a big word. But the very simple thing is, well, in the modern societies, you have to you live like you ride your bicycle. You have to pedal. If you stop pedaling, you fall down. And it's not just that you need to pedal, you need to pedal every day a little bit faster than you have yesterday. Otherwise, you will drop off, right? And we see that most obviously in economy. You've got to grow. If you don't grow, you're not just going to stagnate, you're going to disappear. You see it in academy, you see it just every domain of our lives. This is the experience. And that's then the push constantly to grow. We never have time, for instance. Why is it that we are rich in so many things, But we are always in this huge deficit, unpayable deficit, when it comes to time. Why is it that we are everywhere else in our imagination, just not right here? There was an old joke, you probably heard it, but it was told when I was a student. We had a president who was, as presidents of institutions often do, jetting everywhere, all over the place for whatever reason. Nobody knew exactly as students why and how, but he wasn't there. And then the question was, what's the difference between God, and the name of this president was Peter? The difference is that God is present everywhere, but that Peter is present everywhere except here. Now, think of a teenager sitting at the table. Think of teenager's mother or father sitting at the table with a smartphone. They're everywhere except here. So this kind of the idea is then, just like the time speeds up, so also our attention scatters, because we always want a need to increase. And I love the hamster wheel metaphor, because Kenneth Galbraith, some of you will know him as a famous economist of the previous generation. In Affluent Society, he said, nobody has thought of a hamster wheel as an image of good society or good life. And yet, we are all in a hamster wheel. And the good question to ask is, why is that the case? Must we be? Who has nudged us? Who has pushed us into that? Is there a way in which we can step out of it and kind of have goals that are weightier than simple to make another step which will go down so that I can make another step so that I can be moving in that hamster wheel circle, hoping to get more and actually getting more. But problem is that what I get doesn't give stuff back to me that I was expecting from it to give to me. So and that's the. This is a long answer to this question.
Okay. It's good. It's good.
Three lectures combined. But the consequence is not that we are not progressing, but the consequence is that our houses are nicer, our cars are fantastic compared to 20 years ago. All sorts of stuff you can name that it's fantastic. But it doesn't give us what we have expected from that. That is the problem with the entirety of our lives and the kind of settings in which we are. And I think we need to wake up and say, what is wrong with our lives that are lived that way? What is it that truly matters? And how can I grasp that true life that truly matters? Now, that's what really motivates the work on this book on life worth living and other things that we do at the center.
So we have we have 4 priorities really that we're exploring over the course of this year that are related to our theme of a well-lived life. We're talking about what it means to be people who have faith in an uncertain world. We're talking about what it means to be people of community and belonging to one another. We're talking about what it means to be and to become a center for well-being for all. And that includes what it means to be people who are really concerned and embedded in a care for the well-being of our community. Yep. I'd love to go through a couple of these in light of the question, life well lived and life worth living. And I'd like to be curious with you about how they impact what it means for us as people of faith to flourish. So when it comes to the question, which B is worth living, what's the role that faith can or ought play in each of our individual and collective lives as we think about navigating or living the question, which B is worth living?
Yeah. You know, one of the reasons why we take great religious traditions and even great philosophical traditions as we write about this issue in Life Worth Living book is because it's these great religious traditions and philosophies that have almost invariably placed that very question at the heart of their quest. And when it comes, and if you look simply at, for instance, at science, or if you look everywhere else, what you will find, even psychology very often, what you will find is that it will help you negotiate life. There's another very popular course at Yale. It is Laurie Santos's course, Psychology and the Good Life. It's a wonderful course. I know Laurie quite well. But her primary question is, primary question that students come to get answered in her course, how do I survive Yale? Right? You need to have certain skills, certain psychological capabilities, and in order to be able to perform well under high pressure that life of a student in such university is, and obviously psychology can give you, if you want to be on this B, this is what you need to do, right? And that's what we often need. But it doesn't tell you, again, what that B is. And I think that is a place where the importance of great religious traditions and philosophies come. Only they have wrestled with that question. My own answer, we are here in a Christian community, is that it is really Christian faith that gives us a window into what kind of life is truly worth for us to live. Now, often people think of Christian faith as, this is a kind of cultural thing to do, or this is a Jesus, my Savior, that kind of plucks me out of some kind of doo-doo that I've placed myself in, or other have placed me.
Thank you.
Placed me into, and God knows there's so many of such situations, and I'm making a little bit light of them, but they do stink in a kind of real existential kinds of ways, and that's all well and good. But there is at the foundation of the Christian faith, Jewish faith as well, is this idea that I have to live into something, that I am called to live into something. And certainly in the Christian faith, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And you can parse that out, and you can take Jesus, look at Jesus, and you ask yourself, how do I, in my circumstances, live that kind of a life? How do I live in my set of circumstances into that kind of life, and toward that kind of life? Now you're talking about what truly matters. And you can see that that's how Jesus understood it. For instance, he gives this parable. A person goes and finds that somewhere the parable about a pearl, it was actually that I wanted to name, finds this pearl. Who he knows that's of infinite, this great value. He goes, and what does he do? He sells everything that he has, and he buys that pearl. Now there it is. This is what matters the most. It matters more than anything else that I have. It matters most than anything I can otherwise acquire. This is what life has to grow into. And everything else then acquires its value from being lived into this calling that I have. We often think that our values in our lives, they add to one another. It's almost like bank account. I have this, I have that, I have that. I stock them all up, and then I have a life, right? But actually, the value is received from the ultimate value toward which all these things go, and that's why it's so important for us to discover faith serves primary reason to set this value, to give us that, and to call us, to gently nudge us into that, to be along the way when we try to strive and fail to live into this. So your faith in uncertain times, that seems to me that it's a most important pillar.
So how do you think we, as people who take seriously the question, what is the life worth living, what's a way that we could practice letting faith help us answer that question? What are ways that we can say, if I had my glasses, I would say, what's a way that we can practice spiritually allowing faith to help us answer that question?
I'm hesitating a little bit because you have to kind of break it down to small segments, right? Well, let's say a very simple thing in our lives, like joy. Everybody wants joy. We love laughter. We love a good time. We want something like joy must be part of our lives. If it isn't, everything else becomes drab. And you might think that joy is the simplest of all things on the planet, right? You just rejoice. And yet, when you tease out how it is that I come to rejoice, over what should I rejoice? Do I need to have something over which I should rejoice? Generally, people think that these days that a kind of emotionally satisfying life is a life of kind of pleasure, pleasing life. But so life can become very pleasing if you smoke a joint, for instance. Maybe LSD might do you better. I have no idea about how those drugs work, but something of that sort. You can chemically induce the state of kind of hilarity, and you might. And as a matter of fact, many people try to do just that because they haven't learned the skill of rejoicing in things that are before us. And I'll give you what I try to practice so that I can get joy. One of the best lines in the great poem of Dante, Divine Comedy, comes in the third book, Paradiso, at the very beginning. There are these. He's going through different levels in paradise, and you think, well, paradise has different levels. There's this neighborhood, and then there's this. What's your street? May Street, or and that's paradise. Well, we could talk about that, but so there are these souls there who, and then Dante. Has a guide, ask them, right? But how can you be really happy when you know that there's so much higher to go, right? Obvious question, right? How can you be satisfied? How can this be heaven for you? Why don't you try to be at the very very top, and then you're going to be happy? Response of those souls in that point says, we long for what we have. We long for what we have. I think the key to satisfaction is learning how to long for what I have. It's not that you shouldn't long for what you don't have. We do that all the time, right? But it's that one should long for what one has. How can I enjoy my child if I don't long for the child? How can I enjoy my partner? How can I enjoy my house? How can I enjoy these clothes if I not, in certain sense, say, wow, this is I long for this. This is good. I'm not in my imagination always that I like his shoes better than mine, right? Because they're cooler than mine are, and so forth. This life of comparison that we have, and somebody has something, and immediately longing moves away from what we have, and we think to ourselves, well, we have it. Why should I long for what I have? And yet, if you don't, you become indifferent to it. It just stays there. And it seems to me that the source of joy is this very simple practice to attend to, stay with, long for what's already there.
So, say a little bit about the way that other people can be a part of the way in which we seek to live the question, which be is worth living? How important is belonging, or what's the role of the communities that we spend our time with in this journey that we make?
You know, one of the things that our way of life does for us is that it isolates us. And it isolates us even when we are together. I mean, I've just done dumb comparison between my shoes.
I actually like your shoes better, but that's a different deal.
And Joshua's shoes.
I'm going for those shoes sometimes.
I mean, it's a silly little thing, but it's this life of competitive comparisons that kind of ruins the community very often, so that we cannot neither long for what we have and affirm for it without always thinking I should be somewhere else, nor can we affirm something that somebody else has without envy or without pride. I'm better than you, right? In these ways. And once you are in a situation of this kind of comparison, and then the striving comes in, right? Striving comes in to kind of even out, but it's not just enough to even out. You've got to do a little bit better than the other. And suddenly, community, actually, the roots of the community, which is affirmation of you in your being, starts eroding. And we are fundamentally communal beings. We cannot live as individuals. We know that for all sorts of studies, the loneliness as one of the plagues of our society. But we can live with others only when others matter to us as human beings, when we can look in their eyes, recognize something precious in their eyes, something unique and something precious, and build a community around this kind of sense. And I think what erodes communities, what I see everywhere undermining the possibility of communities, is this constant jostling for positions of power, preeminence, or whatever that might be, and in the process devaluing actually the other.
So one of the things that I'm curious about, that I love most about the book, is that you're constantly putting in conversation the various religious traditions, and almost like in a conversation with one another. And I'm wondering how your students, who themselves come from different faith traditions or different philosophical traditions, how they experience what happens when you begin to hear these voices in conversation with others. By and large, we live in a world full of people that we're bumping into, and there may be, Methodists in the room, and there may be Catholics in the room, and there may be Baptists in the room, and there may be some of our Jewish brothers and sisters in the room, and some of our Muslim friends in the room. But how important is that kind of a community when it comes to living in a world that seems to be fragmented and pushed out by religious difference at times? How important is it for us as a people to practice the art of being in conversation with people who believe differently than us or think differently than us? And how has that impacted the students who've taken the course?
Yeah, I think this is an essential part of the course. A number of institutions teach courses like this, but from the perspective of single tradition. You might have a Christian college, and then this would be inculcated a certain vision of life. It's more difficult to do it at institutions like Yale or public universities. But nonetheless, I think that this model that's in this book is our attempt to do it in the public domain. And basically what I say to students when I open the class, I said to students, each of these traditions talks about the great questions of our life, and each of these traditions claims to be true. Now, what I want you to do is, for the purposes of this class, and for the time, say 2 weeks or week and a half, 5 sessions that we have on one of those traditions, I want to take you to take seriously that claim. I want you to live yourself or imagine yourself living in that tradition. And sometimes we actually invite people, I have done it with students. Signature practice of Judaism is observing Shabbat. And I ask students, why don't we just, those of you who are Jewish, tell us how you observe Shabbat. We'll all observe it for one day. And then we'll get together and we'll ask the question, what happened to us when we did that? Or we would do fast. Or we would pray 5 times a day, different traditions, what they do, right? It's amazing what happens. It's almost like a double shift that occurs. One is shift on myself. Wow, what would it be for me not to use my electronic devices for one single day? What does it do for me? And people are surprised. Both the difficulty, but also freedom, in a sense that ensues. And you suddenly start thinking about the other person very differently once the impact has occurred of this sort. And so the idea is for people to start discerning in also very practical ways of what would it mean for me to dedicate myself to leading a life that isn't just governed by observing what other people do, and so I do it, or by the whims that I have. What we also do in the class is it's almost like it's a class in civil conversations about most fundamental issues. Listening is part of it. Imagine that it is true for a moment. Now, that would be very interesting if you try to practice that in a political environment. What drives the person to say what they say? Imagine if that were actually true, what might be the consequences? What do they see would be positively beneficial consequences? In a sense, it invites you imaginatively to place yourself in the position of the other person. I think our political, our other forms of lives would be so much richer and with fewer decibels and less combative. So that's one of the things that is the case. I'll tell you the story of my own engagement with the Muslim-Christian dialogue. My mother is a very pious a woman. She was a Pentecostal believer and took her faith very, very seriously. Prayed for her son when I was wayward. Prayed for me when she wasn't sure I was doing the right thing theologically and so forth, right? And so I was involved in this Muslim-Christian dialogue, and she was thinking, well, I don't. She had she trusted me, but some questions about it. And one day, she was visiting me one day, I received a phone call. And phone call is from Prince Ghazi from Jordan, who was my main interlocutor as a Muslim scholar, and who's also attended the issue of the public role of Islam in the world. So we talked together, and I tell him the story of another friend of mine who was in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. And he was walking down the outside of the area, and he said to me, that other friend of mine, said, God spoke to me. And so I tell Ghazi what God said to this guy, and then he starts, Miroslav, in Islam we have a We have a practice of discernment to learn what criteria by which we can know when it is that God speaks to us and when it is that it's just indigestion, whatever else, whatever else might it be. And so he tells me all these criteria that I have, and I said, I come he knew that I come from Pentecostal tradition. I mean, we also have, if you're very careful, Apostle Paul speaks about discernment, and you have to have whole gift of discernment to know when is something the right and when something is actually. So this conversation is going on. My mother is listening. And I and I put my phone down, and she said, Miroslav, this Ghazi guy, he's good for you. And I said, this is exactly what happens in interfaith dialogue if you do them really well. Right? That suddenly you realize, this guy is good for me. This guy is not a weird obstacle. This guy is not just. I mean, there are various kinds of others, right? There are various kinds of us too. It's not that we are our own best friends or best friends of our neighbors. So I'm not trying to say everybody's just cheery and great. But if you look and if you go deeper in those traditions, they can be actually good for you. And it didn't do anything to divert me from my own faith. It can actually strengthen it, enrich it. And so I think that those kinds of dialogues can be really, really important. And I think what our class, Yale class, does is teaches students to be attentive to what they disagree profoundly with or what is simply alien, and to try to appreciate it, understand it from within. And it's a huge benefit, I think.
It strikes me that one of the things that you were reminding me of, and that I'm hearing you say, is that we don't, as Christians, as people of faith, we don't arrive to the answer of which life is worth living by accident. It takes a commitment to spiritual practice, which includes a kind of listening to others along the way, sometimes people within our tradition, sometimes others, and that discernment journey that we're on, it requires us to take seriously the practices of our faith as a way of being able to live the question in real time. I'm curious, because that could sound in some instances like, if I just pray harder, or if I just do a little bit, if I practice Ignatian spirituality and I say the examen in the morning and in the evening, and if I make sure that I'm at church every Sunday when the doors open, and I do all these things, that life's going to level out, right? Yeah, and that somehow I might arrive at the answer. Which of my lives is worth living? I'd love for you to say a little bit about how grace helps us discover life worth living.
Yeah, that is. Am I on?
I think the volume dropped down a little bit.
Well, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
This is a really great question, and the question of grace. And it's certainly in the Christian tradition, but I find it also in different ways in other traditions. You can imagine Christian life on the one hand as you imagine your daily physical exercise routine, right? So you've got to put in time. You've got to pay with the currency of pain, and then the results you might see, right? And so basically, there's a kind of correlation between what we invest in, how much time we invest in, and what we get out of it. Sometimes our body plays tricks on us, like it did on me, and I twisted my back, whatever I did with my back, and so exercising it doesn't naturally follow. But nonetheless, that's roughly the law law of things. It's entirely our work in many ways. But when it comes to spiritual exercises, it seems to me that one of the crucial elements is kind of recognizing that I'm not kind of self-contained, or that I am not simply myself as I am going on my way. That there is always someone. You can say inside, you can say around, you can say different ways in which God can be present to us. But to discover that it is not simply our way of life, and it's not simply a way of life on a path towards something. It is also a way of life that is always carried by something that's larger than our own lives. And that's, I think, what in Christian tradition, that's what faith means. A certain kind of ability to entrust oneself. Mm-hmm. To entrust oneself that even when things do not appear in terms of my progress or in terms of how my life feels, mm-hmm. to go appropriate to the amount of investment that I have made. Even then, that I can trust that my life is being held by someone. That God is holding my life. That I might not know how that holding is taking place. That God is even more than just holding my life. That God is somehow, as the great church father has said, closer to me than I am to myself. Now this sense that I have a divine being that is, to whom I matter more than I matter to myself, who is more internal to me and more knowing of me than I am of myself. I think to me that's one of the most beautiful things about the Christian faith. And indeed, who tells me even when I failed, when I am in the doo-doo, is that how I called it? Even then when he looks at me, he looks at me as the one who's loved unconditionally. All of these, what I've said, are modes of God's grace in our lives. God knows we live in a performance society today. You've got to perform, at least where I come from, but that's no different here. And somehow that somebody can tell me that I am valuable as I am. Strip all the achievements, strip all the mistakes, and I'm valuable as I am. That is such a great thing. Last night we were talking about, but I've discovered just maybe 2 days ago. So my fresh discovery for you, for whatever it's worth. I was reading in the book of Genesis, and when God creates the world, the first chapter, God's creating different things. And after each time that God creates something, or a group of things together, a kind, says it was good. And then at the very end, when everything was created, then God says, and behold, it was very good. Now first, just the idea that you and I, as created, are always already very good. That's an amazing thing. But God looks, who is he talking to? Look. It was very good. It's almost like he's trying to get whoever was there, right? But I think what's happening actually is that writers are wanting to get you and me to say, now get away from perspective that you inhabit. Take yourself up and look at this thing the way I look at it. And then you will see that there's a lot to gripe and complain about. And that's going to happen later on in the story, right? But that initial statement about who we are, what the world is, it is good that you exist. My goodness, if we could have it said to us, it is good that you are. However you are, it is good. Now, modes of grace, and as you can tell when I speak, I ravel in that grace because I think it is something that holds us, something that we can't hear from anywhere, something that maybe our mother, when she's in a good mood, and we're not screaming, tells us that when we're small. But it is. What is the most fundamental act and statement of the Christian faith? All the commands, all the demands, everything else what should come is preceded by this existential affirmation. But if you ask me why am I Christian, this is the reason.
So as we move towards wrapping this up, it's been way too fast, but I wonder how that I wonder what that spiritual practice, and I'm wondering this for myself, I'm wondering how to incorporate this epiphany that you had as a spiritual practice might look like. I wonder.
Now that's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Right. But I wonder for us. People often say what's a takeaway from our faith forums? Like I'm curious as I think about as we grapple in our own lives of how to answer what's the life worth living. How being able at the end of the day, things done and things left undone. Getting ready to cut the lights off, or sometimes we fall asleep with the TV on, but cut the TV off. I wonder what being able to sort of look at the day and to be able to say out loud to ourselves, behold, it is good that you are, might do to our being able to live the question, which life is worth pursuing. Wonder how being able to wake up in the morning and to think about how we're moving into the middle of our day or to the beginning of our day, and to take a deep breath and to wiggle our toes and to think about getting back on the hamster wheel
sometimes
that's waiting for us. And I know plenty of us may wake up to the phones pinging with the alerts and we already feel like we're behind. I wonder what it might be like to start the day by saying that, look, behold, it is good that you are, might do to our pursuit of living the question, what is the life worth living? I wonder if you could, I'm going to give you the last word here.
This is great.
I'm going to give you the last word here. When it comes to faith, life worth living includes blank.
I'll put it abstractly again.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
you won't be happy.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. We're going to go rapid fire. I'm going to take you through the priorities.
I think it involves foundation and a goal.
Okay.
And foundation is behold. And the goal is for me to start living from God's perspective out rather than from mine.
Yeah. When it comes to community, life worth living includes
accepting other as a gift.
When it comes to well-being, life worth living includes
Rolling up your sleeves with joy.
when it comes to caring for our city and the well-being of others, life worth living includes
Holding, what's the action of
locking
holding?
arms.
Locking arms. And saying our common space should be a space of God's peace, shalom.
Miroslav, thank you for your time. Thank you for your gifts to the church and to the broader world. And thank you for helping us live the question what it means to have a life worth living. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We invite you to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and connect with Christ Church Charlotte on social media. If you'd like to attend a Faith Forum live, visit christchurchcharlotte.org/Faith Forum to view dates and details of upcoming talks.